Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Paul Brooker, and I am joined by Matthew McWhorter. Hello, Matthew. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having me on.
Well, this is Matthew's first time on the platform. Matthew, could you just give everybody a little bit of background as to who you are?
Yeah, I am an American lawyer, corporate lawyer for, among other things, Royal Dutch Shell, which is now just Shell, I believe, out of London. So, hello to everyone in England. But I had been a lawyer for many years. In my 40s, I had massive medical problems, cancer and a heart attack. And people asked me about my bucket list, and it was mostly to read a bunch of books. One of those books was the Bible because I was named after it, Matthew Mark McWhorter. So that's sort of the story, and how I end up coming into this picture is that I was an atheist who didn't really believe any of this, hadn't been taught any of this. Read the books I was named after, started taking an interest in it, trying to decide whether it was true. Ultimately, decided it is true. Became Christian, but that I saw a problem, so I wrote this book, Canon Crossfire, and just to explain what the problem is and show people how at least one way to solve the problem. So, but that's the basic background. I from Canton, Ohio, grew up, went off to law school on the East Coast, worked for a bunch of companies and law firms and that sort of stuff. So I was a fairly boring person, I would say, right up until the medical problems and then my desire to become a Christian. So that's the main thing I seem to be noted for these days.
Fantastic, Matthew. And I've got to say, I do resonate with the journey that you've been on because I was very much an atheist 5 years ago before the dreaded
Mm.
lockdown happened and all sorts of craziness happened in the world. And I think there's a lot of people out there that were confused and lost. And, I've been a Christian my whole life, but I haven't been a practicing Christian.
Yeah.
And these last 5 years, I don't know. Could you explain to me what happened these last 5 years? Because there is a resurgence in religion across the
And
world.
and it sounds like it's the same mental process of when I was reading this Bible for the first time, and I'm just a couple years before you. So mine sort of begins a little bit before COVID, but certainly strengthens and develops as part of that. And it's just all of a sudden I'm reading a book that explains this madness of the world. And I actually say to people all the time, like I have good days and bad days as a Christian and a believer in God. I'd never doubt the devil. Like that part, that there is something seriously wrong out there and something wrong within human nature, and that there is uh, just these explanations that you get from philosophy or science or people who are anti-religious. They don't make any sense, because this is not a rational thing that's going on. There's a lot of irrationality and human blindness and craziness going on that just is not explainable really in any honest way otherwise. And as an example, I mean, I had, all sorts of friends and business colleagues, et cetera, that have never spoken to me again after I merely sent them an email saying I'd become an author of this book, for example. Like, I mean, just admitting that I had become Christian was the end. Like, that's rational thinking. And these are all sophisticated intellectual people, et cetera. But you see this bizarre, non-intellectual, non-rational responses, et cetera. It's a weird world out there, and to me, the only real explanation is something supernatural is going on.
Yeah, and I can't agree with you more because I sit here and when I say to people, I've found God again effectively. That's the only way to
Mm.
describe it. And there's something in their eyes, and it's fear. It's
Exactly.
fear because
Yeah.
if they acknowledge God, they acknowledge heaven and hell. They
Yep.
acknowledge the sum of their actions. And I, it's a weird thing. You do lose friends. I'm not a religious nut, as they call it. I'm not
Exactly.
screaming at the top of my voice about God and everything like that. But
My book, for example, when I say I send an email out to people, my book is just a re examination of evidence. That's my job. That's what I did. That's their job. That's what they did. And all of a sudden you get this crazy reaction. And like you said, you can, depending on who some people just ignore me, but those that actually interact with you, you see, like you said, it's the blindness because they know what it ultimately would mean to them. And you see how that affects the mindset and the thinking, you know?
yeah, yeah, because if you admit heaven and hell are real, God and Satan are real. Oh, the perspective it gives you on life. The
Exactly.
perspective. Your actions have consequences, not just to you, but to the Almighty above.
Yep. And you see the how it, like I said, how it fits in the world and how actions have consequences on you, how the universe has consequences because of God having created it and supporting it, etc. Like it explains everything in a way that I didn't appreciate beforehand. So I didn't know this. I wasn't really educated in Christianity too well. So I had only a dim grasp of it. So I found this explanation very compelling. And then the question becomes, well, is it just an explanation or is it real, right? And that's where my research came in. But it's as much a philosophical shift that occurs in the middle in the way that you see the world as well, much as it is this evidentiary basis. I mean, the evidentiary basis is kind of the first step. I wouldn't believe it if it didn't have evidence, but what I'm believing in is so much more than just what the evidence points to. It is this philosophical shift, and as soon as it occurs, suddenly things become obvious. You see God throughout your life. You see God operating in the universe in a way you never did before, and you just wonder why you were so blind in the first place.
It is so true. And someone pointed this out to me, effectively showing us how stupid we are,
Yeah,
really. And I'm
exactly.
sorry, but I'll hold my hands up. I was in that camp as well.
Totally.
When, how can I describe it? When they convinced us we were living amongst a plague that was going to end all life on the planet. And then when you take a step back and you realize, well, it wasn't that bad. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, some people passed away, but we
exactly.
also eliminated flu in that one moment. COVID was killing flu, which was fantastic from a
Yeah,
point of killing flu. But oh
yeah.
well, the flu's back now. And you've got to sit there and you've got to go. They've made us so, how do I say it, nose to the grindstone, that we don't stop and look at our faith. We don't stop and talk to each other and respect each other the way we used to. It's very easy now, especially in business, because you're not standing in front of that person and shaking their hand, to do the most horrible things to another human being. And we've got to
Absolutely.
understand that.
Absolutely. And one of the things with the COVID situation, but also with my research, et cetera, is people do not double check things they want to believe. If you think something's true, if you whatever, like it's 30 seconds, just Google it. Just take a look, just whatever app, people will not do it. It is amazing to see that sort of blindness. And then throughout my experience with the Bible, the reading, I talk about many different things, but remember those bracelets that people used to wear? What would Jesus do? I sometimes
Yeah.
wonder if we really ought to make bracelets that say what would happen to Jesus, because the actual story the Bible's telling you, even Christians kind of forgot get this. We lived in such a bubble and we kind of forgot what the world really is like, etc. But like what happened to Jesus? Well, he was accused of a crime he didn't commit, wrongly convicted. The people who celebrated him coming into Jerusalem the week before lined the streets to celebrate as he was tortured and executed in front of them. That is what happened to him. And that is what humanity is actually like. But as you say, there was this time and a place where we lived in a fairly civilized society. I actually think of it as a World War II bubble. So many men had gone off and joined the military and sort of learned discipline and values, etc., that we had sort of a cultural baseline that has just disintegrated and disappeared. And we're now just being exposed to what things were like. I mean, the world was a nasty, horrible place before Christianity, and we're kind of sliding back to that as our de-Christianization of our societies is occurring. And as I say, it's as a Christian, you kind of should have expected this, but we were living in a bubble, and you see how humanity can blind ourselves. But it's right there in the Bible. It's telling you humanity is not a pleasant group of people.
It isn't without structure, because
It,
we all know the moment you stop believing in right and wrong, heaven and hell, that
yep,
is when you can rationalize. And the human race is amazing at rationalizing to do what
oh,
they want to do. And
absolutely.
that's where the most heinous things happen. Our laws were founded on religion initially, but
Yep,
somehow the people, dare I say it, who wanted to behave how they felt like, have managed to creep themselves up the seat of power to the top, to then be able to erode the laws as they stand to serve their own purposes. And,
yep,
we can see that across the board with what's going on. I mean, the UK, well, I mean, that is
Yeah.
just a mess in itself. The US,
And
by the looks of
and
it,
so
has taken,
quick.
yes, yeah. In the space of just 3 or 4 years, the
Yeah,
UK has done this. And dare I
exactly.
say it, who knows? We may be looking at revolution.
Uh, I don't know what the future is. I don't know,
Mm,
but I'll tell you. I pray outside of an abortion clinic, and let's put all that aside. Put the religious view of abortion aside. Put it all aside. 99% of the women walking into an abortion clinic have done no research on the medical elements of it, the philosophical, the theological, anything of that sort at all. They just want this problem solved, and they're willing to kill somebody over it without exploring whether or not they're killing somebody. Like they're not even
yeah.
willing to look into it. They're not exploring. I'll grant maybe there's 1% who have done the work and truly thought this out from start to finish. But it's just to me the shocking nature that people are willing to go to what might be an extreme result of murdering somebody without doing the research and making an informed decision. If you made an informed decision, okay. Uninformed is 99%. It's a casual reaction to a inconvenience in their life. Bam. Again, it just shows you how humanity really is, that there is a nastiness to us and a savagery and an inconcern for the other, lack of concern for the other person that is just kind of amazing to encounter. And as I say, it's hard to explain to me, except once I read the Bible and sort of saw how the universe really is structured. Then it all started making more sense.
But
Still unfortunate, but it at least makes sense as to what's going on out there and what the solution is.
going back to the Bible, and funnily enough, what you said about Jesus, celebrated 1 minute, executed the next.
Yeah.
And when you hear it, it is almost like, dare I say it, a guidebook to what is going to happen and how to deal with it. Because the amount of people that I've spoken to and they've got to really, really bad points in their life is the only way to describe it. They've all of a sudden, out of the blue, almost like they've had a calling, they've picked up the Bible, they've opened it and found something that resonates with them, that has helped to give them clarity, that has helped to give them the direction that they've needed to carry on with the rest of their lives. And some people have been to some very dark places. And that singular book, has given people so much hope in the world. It has steered them towards other people who want to be hopeful. And do you know what? I've got to sit here and go, thank you for whoever wrote the original Bible, because that is the book that has helped bring human society to a reasonably strong place. Obviously, we're now, there's cracks showing, but I believe that's just totally down to the fact that we are not religious anymore. They have eroded a religion. They've made it so we have to work on Sundays. They've made it so we can't just be with our families and go to your local church and everything. You can see it's an attack because religion gives us the only way to describe it is to give us hope.
Yeah. And when you say people have been to a dark place, I kind of find that was a key part of my journey. I'm sure it was part of yours as well, but
Yeah.
it's like that is part of who we are as people, that you will face these things. And it's still a hopeful moment as long as you reach out for the right book and uh, find the truth out there and go from there. But that can be helpful. And I sometimes find when I'm talking to people that haven't been to that spot that their Christianity can be very shallow. It's like, oh, life is good, so Jesus loves me. Like, well, life could be really bad tomorrow, and Jesus will still love you, but you may not appreciate that when everything has been going well. You're young and things are going, you're young, healthy, life is going easy. That was kind of what happened to me. I just didn't think about these things. I didn't care. And like I said, I wasn't religious at the time, but it was part of my not caring. And it's only, well, that I'm at the possible end of my life after these medical things. And it's like, well, what do I want to do? And I mean, my list was so stupid, it's crazy. But at least on it was to read the books I was named after. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, this explains everything. It explains the malaise in my life, the lack of motivation, the lack of, it's all right there. And it's just such a wonderful thing to come to it.
Oh, fantastic. Can I ask some more insights from your book? What other
Yeah.
what
So,
other things do you cover?
Yeah, so my book is at a very basic stage because it's just the oddity of how I came to this. So I was not being recruited into a church by a person. So there was nothing but a pile of books that I bought off Amazon, right? So I go on Amazon, I'm like, all right, I was named Matthew Mark. What books do I buy? Well, Matthew Mark are part of one book, the Bible, but that Bible, there's a Protestant version, a Catholic version, and an Orthodox version. Even within each of those three, there are different translations. And then even with different translations, there's completely different commentaries from different scholars, different denominations, etc. I bought gigantic piles of books. I bought over 100 Protestant Bible commentaries just to read. So what I did was I read Matthew chapter 1 across all of these different Bible commentaries, went on to chapter 2. It was so fascinating, and I was getting so interested in all these different ways of seeing the same sentences, basically, right? But I started with the Gospels, which was key, found them interesting, started looking into the epistles and the rest of the New Testament, and then went back to the Old Testament. So as I'm doing this, I start asking myself several questions like, is this true? And so I have two things going on. I buy a pile of those books, The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, et cetera. The books trying to show you that there's plenty of evidence that Jesus was real and that we have, eyewitness testimony in the Gospels. I found that fascinating, but what I started to realize was there was a disconnect that people didn't realize these two questions are related and that it's actually kind of the same evidence that justifies, that explains, and authenticates the New Testament also relates to why Catholics and Orthodox accept these extra books that Protestants don't accept. So that's where the canon crossfire comes in, is this disconnect that people weren't asking the same question, these two questions at the exact same time, like I was. And because no one had done that, they hadn't done a what I would say is the most basic piece of research to answer questions about these books. And that's where my legal background, et cetera, comes in. What you would have happen is the different denominations would say, well, I have quotes from three fathers that say that my Bible is the right one. And they would give you three quotes, and the other side would give you three quotes. And I would be like, who cares? You cherry pick three answers. I want to know what every single Christian ever said about these books in the earliest years of Christianity. And that book didn't exist. I looked all over for it. I tried to find it. And ultimately, I just had to create it. It is now possible in the internet era. There are databases. You search them. You find out where books are referenced. Um, you then can go to those individual writings of the ancient church, find the references, pull them out. That's what I've done in my book. Within a few hours to a few days, any person can find out what every Christian ever said about these books in the first 450 years of Christianity. The rest of my book is explaining why that matters. And it matters because there is this conflict where people are talking about these extra books and saying, well, the evidence for those is too little, it came too late. And they're saying how wonderful the evidence is for the Gospels. Pull it together, and you're going to need a new explanation. Whatever the explanation is, my explanation is to accept the books, but I don't push that on people in the book that I wrote. I leave it to the reader. But the point is, this is a crucial question, and now the research has been done. Everybody can go and look at it. So that was mine. It's just a very simple evidentiary question. What did everybody say? I wanted to know, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. So that's the key thing that I pulled together. And if you want specific examples, there's all sorts of amazing things that I discovered. One of them, just a question of what do the Jews say about these books, right? And finding that the Jews don't say quite what the Christians say about these extra books was one finding. But the Jews go into exactly, they're when you talk to Jews about their faith, they are less obsessed with Christianity than Christians think they are. We always think, well, they must be facing this choice of do I believe in Jesus? Like they don't, that has nothing to do with their beliefs at all. They just think he was a fraud and fake and off to the side. And so the Jews are quite open about what happened and why they don't accept certain of these books. And one of them is called 2 Maccabees. In the book of 2 Maccabees, there's a story of a woman with 7 sons. All 7 sons are martyred in front of her. And the Jews do not accept 2 Maccabees as authentic, divinely inspired prophecy in scripture. And part of that is because it's not accepted in a book called the Talmud, and the Talmud lists the books that the Jews accept. And at the same time that they rejected this book, there is, if you look into the Jewish scholarship, they call it a chronological shift in the story of the woman with seven sons. What happened is they basically plagiarized the story and put in a new story in the Talmud. So the Talmud has a story of a woman with seven sons who were all martyred, but it's a completely different story that happens in the Roman Empire at the time that this Talmud is being worked on, and not this historic story from two Maccabees. That is a fact. It's right there in black and white in any Jewish book describing the scholarship of the woman with seven sons. I don't know any Christian who's ever heard this or understands what I'm saying and then understands how devastating that would be. Imagine a Protestant is arguing with Catholics over the canon or Orthodox over the canon, and the Protestant says, we should follow the list in the Talmud because that's what the Jews give us. Like, allow me to pull out a story that you've never heard about how this, two Maccabees was not just, ruled outside of it, but it was plagiarized and moved into this. And let me have the Jewish rabbis explain to you why that happened. And the Jews would say that's because they were responding to the fact that the Christians accepted two Maccabees to such an extent that it offended Jews, and Jews decided to get rid of two Maccabees and have this new story instead. Like, that is just an amazing discovery. And again, I haven't met anybody who even knows the most basic pieces of that, and it's just because they didn't look at the two questions at the same time. So somebody who's looking into two Maccabees might know that fact, but they don't pull it back into should we be accepting two Maccabees as canon, right?
Right.
And anyway, that's just one example. There's many others, but it's I found it fascinating. Every Protestant who's read my book has loved the book precisely because there's all this little detail and these little things that come out of it that no one's ever heard or seen because they didn't do the research. And it just hadn't occurred. It would have been very difficult to do the research without the internet. Now that there's an internet, it can be done. It still took me years. I've assembled it, and now people can read it in a few hours to a few days.
Wow, fantastic. So
Yeah.
you've managed to cross-reference every Bible in existence, is
Yeah.
what you're saying, and
Well,
condense.
that's exactly. So I went through over 100 Protestant Bible commentaries to find out where the New Testament references these books that the Catholics accept but the Protestants don't. This is all from Protestant scholarship. It's all Protestant commentaries telling you this. I present them for you to read. You can make whatever judgments you want from them, but they're set out to you. You see what's said in the New Testament, you see what's said in the other book, and make your own judgments from there. And then I went through, so that's one piece. A second prong of my research was what did the Jews say? And then the third thing was what did every single Christian in the first 400 and some years say about the books? And as I say, this is just, it's sort of a new foundation for any time people want to talk about these books. That's all the evidence. That's what I'm giving you. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a major project. I just wanted to get it out there. For a long time I was afraid I would die, car wreck or something, and I wouldn't get. I'm like that would be a tragedy. Humanity needs to mooch off of my hard work going forward. That. That was the purpose of my book.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matthew. Has there been any big revelations in your book that has just totally taken your breath away and gone, wow, really?
Yeah, yeah. The two Maccabees was one of them. That, like I said, it's not anywhere, and yet it's right there in black and white. You can look it up yourself. Google the woman with seven sons, and you'll see Jews talking about this chronological shift. That was one. There's other documents and things that I found. I think it's just a very unusual background that I had that I was looking at the two questions at the exact same time. So, one example on a book called Judith, um, Paul seems to be alluding to Judith in his epistle to the Corinthians. In Luke's gospel, Mary and Elizabeth, two women, are alluding to Judith, and that makes sense because Judith is a story, a woman's story, etc. It would make sense that Jewish women knew their heroines, right? And then the very earliest document we have from outside of the Bible from Christians is a epistle from Clement of Rome to the Corinthians as well, and he explicitly mentions Judith. So we have Paul in Corinth, Luke, who may have been with Paul in Corinth, and Clement writing to Corinth, three pieces of evidence lining up with one city about one book at one particular time in the very earliest days of Christianity. That is a mountain of evidence by any historical standard. I mean, you would quickly rule that this Greek city worshipped a goddess or something on
Yeah.
evidence like this. And again, I don't think anybody's made the connection that, these things relate all to Judith, all to Corinth, all at the same time. It's that way of looking at the evidence and seeing it as evidence that came to me as part of this. And it's just seeing these connections that other people didn't because they weren't diving into the evidence like a lawyer looking into an evidence file would.
Oh, brilliant. Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like this book. Wow. I'm wondering if you're going to push a few buttons and make a few people unhappy with this book, actually.
I hear that all the time from Catholics. They're like, Protestants are going to hate this book. Every Protestant who's read it loved it. Protestants love Scripture, first of all. And second is the most fundamental question of a Bible-based Christian is, what is my Bible, right? So they actually love the discussion. Where they go from there is up to them. I don't push it on people. It is not a pro-Catholic book. It's not an anti-Protestant book. It is a piece of scholarship that would sit right there with Protestant scholarship. And the part that I'm actually kind of stunned at when I've talked to the Protestant readers that I've had, they are so interested in the story that these books tell that I didn't expect that at all. But what they're doing is that for the first time they're reading these things and seeing the connections to their own New Testament and Bible and preaching and realizing where certain things come from. It's like, yeah, that's what your own scholarship tells you it comes from, but they hadn't assembled all of that in one piece to realize, well, maybe you should go read these books and see where that's come. So they sort of gloss over these individual references that I found in the Protestant Bible commentaries and just keep reading. But if you go back to that original book that the Jews would have been reading at the time of Christ and see the connections that are being made, it's fascinating to them. So they've loved it. I hired all Protestant editors. I wrote the book, as I say, for Protestants. So Protestant editor, Protestant marketers and publicists, but also a Protestant audiobook reader. She started by telling me she never believed those stupid books. She ended with believing the books and is now arguing with her own pastor over them. Different things of that nature. But it's not an argument, not a heretical argument, but an argument over things he had said, etc. Because she now knows the facts about them. She's now read the stories, she's fascinated them. So Protestants have loved the book, but it's the key thing that I'm trying to say is why this book is important is something that every Protestant piece of scholarship ever written on the canon starts with. It's their first chapter, their first paragraph is telling you, if you're wrong on the Bible as a Protestant, you're wrong on everything. Like you start with the Bible, therefore you must be right on the Bible. And that's the key to the crossfire. But the point that I'm really trying to get out into the world is the research, the pile of evidence that I've now assembled that everybody ought to be looking at.
Fantastic. Well, Matthew, that brings us to the end of the show today. I can say thank you so much for coming on. It sounds a very interesting read, and I think it's going to get you thinking quite a lot from the sounds of it. So where can everybody find you and find your book?
So Canon Crossfire, remember that Canon is scripture, so it's only one N, C-A-N-O-N. CanonCrossfire.com is my website. Have a free preview. You can read the beginning of the book for yourself. You can see lots of reviews, etc., in a blog on there. I'm also on Twitter, and the book is available on Amazon and other websites around the world. There's an audio book. There's a large print edition. And it's actually free to seminarians. If you're interested, look me up on the website and go there. So all sorts of ways to find out more and engage.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for watching today. We're going to put Matthew's links all down below in the description. So all that's left for me to say is to take care, God bless, and see you all soon. Bye now.
Thank you.